Well, it's so wonderful to be back for another segment of ROSAmerica Speaks. If you're new to our program, once a month, we try to bring an interview that's dynamic with our inspiring leaders whose work is making a real difference in inclusion and belonging in education. Lisa, that's me, and my friend Shelley here, co-founded ROSAmerica, which stands for Revealing Origin Stories of America. ROSAmerica is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we deliver professional development programs to educators that empower them to teach their students the origin stories of people of color who've made important contributions to our nation's history, but have been largely left out of school textbooks and curricula. So for more information, you can visit our website at www.rosamerica.us.
So we're very excited to have Joanna Deshay with us this morning. Joanna is actually on our board of directors. So we have a star among our illustrious board. And so we're very happy to have her here. Joanna serves as the executive director of Diversity Leadership Alliance, or DLA, which is an education nonprofit organization that guides leaders in the transformation of culture to build an inclusive community where each person is equally respected and empowered, like that. DLA's mission is also to provide a forum for diversity and inclusion dialogue, as well as learning opportunities to enhance professional development, understanding, promotion, and management of diversity as an essential part of an organization's success. Joanna believes in leading with grace, humility, and passion, and sees herself as a servant leader in her work with the DLA. Joanna is also an international fashion designer, entrepreneur, and an educator with nearly a dozen years of experience in the fashion industry and 20 plus years in corporate America. She's been a university professor and loves to share her passion and expertise in fashion marketing, branding, and design to many students she coaches and teaches. Joanna is a passionate entrepreneur who has designed an intentional life filled with success on her terms. I really like that. And she's also a mother of two amazing young men and is determined to shine as a beacon of light for warrior moms who strive daily to balance passion, family, and community. Welcome, Joanna.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's more. There's so much to your background that you bring to this work, Joanna. You want to share a little bit maybe about your parents' heritage and just, there's so much.
Anything else you want to tell us?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, by the way. This is great. And this is such an important time for us to be talking about just really moving the needle on social justice. So I really appreciate that you all are taking the reins on, sharing these lived narratives that are oftentimes left out of the storybooks, right? So I want to make sure that everyone knows that everyone has a story. And so what we're sharing is just mine, right? And that's the beauty about kind of connectivity and I think what we need to get better at, which is learning everyone's story. So I was born and raised in West Africa to a Russian mom and a Nigerian father. And so when you look at my clothing brand, it's called Black Russian, because again, everything has to be genuinely and authentically who you are as a person. And so my brand was no different than that. So I spent my whole life really looking at the amalgamation of races and how beautiful they can be when they honor each other, not try to change each other, right? And they serve as kind of complements to each other. So my whole life has been an experience, an experiment, if you would, in really honoring culture, honoring races, honoring differences. So I didn't know any different. I didn't know that wasn't a thing, right? That's not what people did, but it's not, right? And so it kind of, I think, naturally and organically led me to the work I'm doing now. So I'm really excited. So we moved to the US, in the 80s. And so I went to college out here. And now I have the great privilege of teaching at my alma mater, which is Arizona State University. And not just teaching, I'm the girl that'll come in and disrupt a little bit. That's my joke. I'm like, oh, I'm a professional troublemaker. It should be on my business cards. It should, that's what it should say, right? Because I really believe that a lot of the injustices that we see are systemic in nature. And so in order to do that, we've got to be willing to disrupt the system. And so that's really what I did. Even with my time at ASU, I created a diversity, equity, and inclusion class that looks
Wow.
at how fashion sees race, how
Mm.
fashion sees size, how fashion sees culture, and then how is it represented? And
Mm.
so, if you're going to, and I said, with all of our new designers coming out, if we don't change the lens, right, if we don't change what they're seeing people with and through, we do them a grave injustice, by sending them out into the world with blinders on. So that's a little bit more about kind of what I do.
Yeah.
So then, how does the work with Diversity Leadership Alliance, how does that complement what you're doing in the classroom? Can you talk a little bit about, your,
It is all the
your-
synergy is quite wonderful. You know what I mean? If you would have told me I would have gotten a chance to live my purpose, and that my purpose would be connected in all the work I do at all the tables I sit at, I would have been like, right. And then I'm going to wake up to my little fairy tale, and that's not going to be the life. But that is it, because the work we do at Diversity Leadership Alliance, it's really about changing the conversations. So when you really think about all of the workshops that we do around equity, all of the workshops that we do around privilege, all of the workshops that we do around abilities, and all of that, it's about changing the narrative. And so it just is a nice synergy to everything I do, from my own business, right? How I design, how I buy, how I produce, because at the end of the day, I want to be a solution. I want to leave this place better. I don't want to say, hey, that's the way it's always been done, So that's really, and that's Diversity Leadership Alliance weaves into all of it, because really it is a conversation about how do we change humanity? How do we change empathy? How do we change the way we interconnect to each other? And so that's above and beyond an organization. That's kind of global and altruistic, if you would. But it has woven into everything I've done, honestly, Shelley. So everything I've done has had some kind of tie back to the work I do with DLA.
So it's a little bit of drip, drip, drip.
Yep.
On people
Yeah.
till
Yep.
the realization comes.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I mean, here we are working in classrooms to try to get the origin stories to be told, and here you are in the business world doing the same thing with businesses.
Yes.
Are those programs, they must be similar in nature in terms of, like, we call ours professional development. Is that what it's called in the workforce too?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the thing about it is, what you all are doing is critical, because the one thing we learned very early on, Lisa, is that those conversations need to be had earlier. We wait until they get into the workforce, and then they're blindsided because someone called them something, or someone, is holding them down because of their cultural background, or because of their sexual orientation, or because of but it's because we didn't have these conversations earlier, right? We didn't expose them to the fact that the history that we've been taught, that we've been experiencing, that we've been learning is just a slice of history, right? I won't say it, and it's not as inclusive because it doesn't tell the whole story. Because if you tell us, like, if three of us were observing something, right? Let's say we're observing an event. There are literally 4 different sides to it, right? There's the actual event. There's what Lisa saw, depends on her vantage and where she was sitting. There's what Shelley experienced, and there's what I saw, right? So that's really what we're talking about. That's not what's being taught. So yeah, and I just think really, I'll tell you, sort of professional development, Lisa, I like to call it, I had this conversation with my boys last night. I like to call it more of a emotional intelligence journey. It's about developing and honing our EQ. You know what I mean? Because that's really what we're lacking with this, the curriculum and the stories we're telling. We're not building emotionally robust students, right? And then they get into the workplace and like, wait, what?
Right.
No one ever told me that. I never knew, all of the atrocities that happen to our indigenous populations. What? Right? Because again, only a slice of the history was told. So what you all are doing is going to build more emotionally robust young people that will be able to be better advocates when they come to like the professional world, where the information won't be new to them. So that's why it's so critical to have these origin stories shared a lot sooner in their kind of education.
So could you talk a little bit about how does this show up in the classroom at ASU? Tell us, maybe even give us an example. You're teaching fashion design, or you're teaching body image, or you tell us. But I'm just interested to hear how they mesh.
More than just about the curriculum itself, the way it shows up in the classroom is the classroom dynamics. Okay, 110
Okay.
broken up with 2 sections. And, in that, there are going to be different individuals. There are different individuals that are from all different cultures, all different abilities. And what I notice is that because students are not they're not acculturated to different stories, when they see someone that comes in with a hijab, right, they're all of a sudden like, they're not sure if they should sit next to them. They're not, it still happens. Or we have someone on the spectrum that may have a different way of processing information. So they need a little bit of time. So if I ask a question, again, I have a child on the spectrum, so I get it. They're processing. And the students will go, she asked you a question. I'm like, wait a minute. We don't do that in this classroom. We do not do that in this classroom. What we're going to do is we're going to be patient. And we're going to give him the time to process his thoughts and get it out. And if it makes you feel uncomfortable, the question really is why? So I want you all to reflect, right? Why are you uncomfortable waiting the additional 30 seconds for this person to gather their thoughts? And usually the answer that comes out is just as brilliant as any other student. We never give them the time to process it. So all of these things, you know what I mean? They're all about, because a classroom is really a little microcosm of the world, right? They're coming from small towns, big cities. They've never left Arizona. Some are from the reservation, you know what I mean? Some are international students, and especially in fashion. So I've got students that are there from Japan, and I've got students, so it's this little microcosm of the world. And I start my classroom. The first thing I say is, this is our world for the next 15 weeks. And I have some ground rules for my world, right? Which you've seen me do it before with the adults, right? Yep. We're not going to be judgmental in here. We're not going to shut anybody down. We're going to approach everyone with respect, kindness, and love, right? This is a safe place. This is a safe space for us to have important conversations, just like I do when I'm, setting up the DLA conversations. And that's how I'm seeing it, Jelly, manifest in the classroom. You know what I mean? It's just they have to learn. And if they come from a small town, that's real hard. Yeah. We're having conversations about race, and we're having conversations about racism and religion and things like that. And their exposure are limited, but because it's a safe place, they feel comfortable enough to say, hey, I don't know what that means. I've never heard that term before. What's a microaggression? Why would I even know that? You know what I mean? How do I see it and recognize it? And when we do the evaluations at the end of the class, Shelley, it's so brilliant. I'm telling you, students are like, best class of my college career.
Wow.
Had no idea we were going to talk about these things. And you know me, I'm like, let's go there. I've got you for 15 weeks. Let's make them count. And so that's why I think it's really important to provide students with a place that they can grow in that manner. You know what I mean? Grow in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I heard you say, even right from the beginning of that question, is that students sort of come in and almost self-segregate to their comfortable spaces.
Absolutely.
And I see that in the world and life. It's like one of the best ways to overcome a bias about a certain group of people is to begin exposing yourself more to those groups of people so that you see them as you would your own community. These are people. They share the same trials, tribulations, and values that I do. I just don't know them. I need to spend time in their presence.
Right. So true.
So then it sounds like you work hard to create that dynamic where they break out of their, I'm going to just use the word tribalism for a lack of, I don't have a better way to express that.
Yeah, right? No, absolutely. And get them out of kind of their what they perceive to be protection, right? Because
Yeah.
we don't sit with those people, whatever it is. And I've got some students that are transgender that are in my class. I mean, I teach fashion. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so there's the whole kind of, that's why I say it's like a little microcosm, right? It's like our own little world. And just challenge them to, to approach people, with empathy and grace and a little bit of tolerance and understanding, and just that at the end of the day, what they realize, and when we kind of debrief in that last week, what they realize is that, man, we are really a lot more alike than we are different, which is, hey, job well done. That's it. That's really that is the aha moment you want for your students to have. And if they, and I always tell them, and the next person you meet, might be different. They may not be kind, they may not be, but that's okay. Every time you meet someone, you're meeting that person, right? You know what I mean? I know that we get really, and they go, well, I know someone that's whatever, fill in the blank. And I go, congratulations, you now know one. You now know one person. That's not across the board. You know what I mean? And so that's what we have to get better at, is meeting people at the place that they're at, and then understanding that individuals are just that, with their own experiences and their own lenses. They come with their own set of experiences that you just have to kind of, work through, but take the time to work through.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. My brain just jumped real quick when you were talking about the one story, the one like seeing people as a monolith. There was a wonderful TED talk done by a Nigerian woman who was discussing her experience of college here in the United States, and she meets her Caucasian roommate for the first time, and she finds out that there were some preconceived notions about what people are like from that part of the world. And then this college student is asking her questions that demonstrate her misunderstandings. And it's just, my mind is just blown as she talks about, hey, I'm just one story, you need to know other stories.
Right, exactly right. And being born and raised in West Africa, I remember when I was younger and I started school, people were like, oh, that's so cool, you're from Africa? And I'm like, yep. And they're like, did you guys live in huts?
Yep.
Oh my
Right.
God.
Yep.
No, we were in a high-rise building. I'm not sure why would I live like, that's weird. Like, they would say, were there animals? I'm like, actually, funny story. And I would tell the story. I said, funny story. The first time I actually saw a lion was in the Phoenix Zoo. It was at the zoo.
Wow.
Sorry, because they were like, were there animals? And I'm like, you guys have really got to stop watching so much National Geographic. And then there are beautiful tribes all around the world, right, that celebrate, but they're not all stories. And even my story, you know what I mean? I happen to have the privilege, right, of having educated parents that worked for the government. So we lived in a nice area, but it wasn't everyone's story. And everyone's story is also not a hut story. You know what I mean? So there's, But again, preconceived notions about, and so that, and again, I always say there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to be open enough to fill in the gaps. That's my big thing. You have to be open enough to fill in the gaps and really say, I don't know what I don't know. Right. And be willing to learn about all of the nuances of the food and the culture and the traditions of that particular person, not representative of an entire tribe, an entire country, an entire continent, but of that person's experience.
Did you know that your passion for fashion would lead you to diversity and inclusion and belonging as your vehicle for, I guess I would say, for making a difference with students, for opening their eyes, for having them, for awakening them about what they think they know versus, preconceived notions versus what's like fashion is the vehicle for awakening. That's
Right.
kind of how I'm
right. No, and
I
didn't necessarily know that fashion would be that, but I knew that I wanted to drive that. And that's part of the reason why I left my job at corporate America. There just came a time where there comes a time, I think, in everyone's life, you kind of soul search a little bit. You go, what am I really doing? And the answer was, you're working, you're making money, But the question I couldn't answer is, what difference are you making?
Oh.
And literally ask yourself, and that's why I love what you all are doing. And when you ask yourself that question, it's very profound to you, right? Like, we're making a difference in this way. I had no measurable, tangible, and making money was not making a difference. That's making money, right? I can do that anywhere. So, it was just at the end of the day, I thought, my mother brought us here, right, from West Africa by herself because she wanted a better way for us. So now that we've made it, we are established, we're now professionals, all have master's degrees, all working hard. What are you giving back? And that was kind of my impetus for, you're not, right? You're just riding this train, right? And I literally had to pull that cord and say, I want off. And so I've always been in fashion. That's always been in my DNA. And because I'm a diverse person, I've cut and created clothes from a diverse perspective. That's my lens. I can't see it any other way because I've got to put it on this body. So when I put it on this body, I'm like, woo, that's not good, And so that's just because clothes are not made for, it's not very inclusive. It's one type of body, but that's not representative of.
That is so true. Clothes are not inclusive. Oh my God,
that's nuts. Yeah.
They're really, and so what happens is the way the system, right, the way the fashion system is designed is either you diet and squeeze yourself into the standard, or it's not for you, and I just kind of felt like, it's not really, there are more women, right, with my body type that are struggling, that love fashion.
Yeah.
That's why, like, this coming year, we have this whole social activation campaign going called Dear Fashion. And it started off with my love letter to fashion. And it goes, and so it starts like this. It says, Dear Fashion, inclusion matters. It's now time for you to represent us. And so the social campaign is about, what if you could write a love letter to fashion, what would it say? Like my girlfriend, who is gorgeous, she's in her mid-50s, gorgeous gray hair. Her Dear Fashion would be like, Dear Fashion, would love to see some women with gray hair in campaigns, because aging, I'm just like, like her thing was like, aging is beautiful.
Yes,
you know what I mean? And just like, let's embrace it. That would be her Dear Fashion love letter. And so I thought it was brilliant to just kind of give people a platform. So that will start in 2023. Just give people a platform to say, hey, can you hear us? We're all here. So but that's, I didn't know it would lead me there, but here I am. So
there's money to be made in satisfying the customers, right?
Right.
So when they say it's about money, I go, it's really,
no, it isn't.
Plus size industry is a industry, and yet you will ignore it and dig your heels in, and give away millions, just so you don't have to make that, couture gown in a size that is plus size. So it's crazy. So it's good stuff. But I'm thrilled.
So we're going to take a little bit of a turn. We want to talk a little bit about, so ROSAmerica is putting on its first Summer Institute. We're very excited about this. This all came together. We actually applied for grants and won 4 out of 4. I'm very proud of that. So that we can pay our presenters like you. And so it's going to be, I'll just say quickly, it's going to take place in June, weeks of June 12th and 19th, total of 8 sessions for each week. And teachers will actually apply to get in, and they will receive a stipend. That's one of the grants that we were able to get for attending, because we know how hard teachers work, particularly in Arizona, and don't get quite the compensation they deserve. So Joanna, you are actually kicking off the first of the 8 sessions. Can you talk a little bit about the theme, by the way, is about culturally, it's an immersion in culturally responsive pedagogy and instruction. So really diving deep into, when you look at the Arizona classroom, it's 55% Latinx and people of color. So we want teachers to basically teach to who is in the room. And that's hence the theme of the Summer Institute. Tell us a little bit about your session at kicking off the series.
Absolutely. And I'll give kind of a 50-foot, level view of it.
Right.
What I love about this session is we really look at the idea of cultural intelligence, right? Like, are you culturally intelligent? And what does that mean in that system of oppression, right? And the most important thing about that specific session is we really hone in on with the teachers that every single one of us, despite our intentions, have some really severe blind spots, right? And that's the thing. I have them, sometimes with young people. I have them, right? And we don't, and part of it is recognizing your blind spots, recognizing the kind of decisions you make because of those blind spots, and even those that are well-intentioned. That's the thing about it, because most people who are teachers and in the teaching profession, they have good hearts, they have good intentions. But sometimes, I call it that my favorite word is we can all get jaded. We meet that one kid that's like, oh my gosh, really? And then that leaves an impression and we leave no room, right, for other things. And it creates a blind spot. We start to fill in data and information even before it's provided. We go, oh, you must be from a poor neighborhood. You must, grow up this way. You must have no parent at home or only one parent at home. Or, we go through this whole kind of litany of things. And so even for us that are diversity practitioners, that are educators, it's this idea of we need to become better, cultural detectives, as I call it, become more culturally intelligent. I know, I always tell that's our big thing is we all need to be better cultural detectives. Like, we're not very good at it. We fill in things that's like, that's not true, but
we're expedient.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And so we're going to really work in that session. We're going to work through those blind spots. And then once you identify them, what do you do with that? How do you become better at seeing each student at the place in the space that they're at and recognizing that those cultural, blind spots do exist? So that's really kind of the genesis of the training. And we're really excited to be able to bring more teachers in and just kind of hear their perspective on cultural intelligence. So it's going to be good.
Well, there's some good reason historically about human species and our evolutionary process for why we box people into certain groups to keep us safe from those people over there that might mean us harm, might try to do battle and to overtake our land. So we are really fighting against that dynamic that naturally exists for each of us. So I do find myself wanting to categorize people, and to resist that, it takes active resistance to undo that.
And intentionality, right? You really have to be intentional about wanting to see it differently, right? To be able to experience. And also, if I always say to teachers, you've also got to approach this as a student. Like teachers, sometimes we get very like, I'm the educator. Like, I know when I go into my classroom, I wrote and especially the ones that are like, I wrote the book, in our college, and you're always like, oh my God, well, you wrote the book, so really there's nothing here, and it's true. You guys have had those classes where you're like,
oh yes, I have. Graduate school, yes.
And so for my students, I always say to them, I am also here to learn. I want to learn from you. And I think, and built into my class, every Monday is a lecture. Every Wednesday, I give the floor to students for them to regurgitate through a presentation what they thought my lecture meant. So they
nice.
have their own presentation. And it's like, okay, so we just talked about race and racism. What did you think? And they get up and they go, well, I heard you say this, and here's an example of this. I found an article. That's the only way. And I sit down.
Nice.
I listen to what they have to say. And I think as we talk about this, not only do teachers have to become better kind of cultural detectives, but they also have to remember that they too, right, can still be students, and that they too can learn from their
Yes.
their students every single time. And I think if we approach it from that way, I think we'll be able to really get some better kind of synergy in the classroom. So that's really what the session's about.
So that's fabulous. I actually heard two educators talk about culturally responsive teaching as you can relate to your students as assets or as deficits.
Yep.
So if you look out into the classroom, you say, oh my goodness,
Right.
here's all these shortcomings,
Yeah.
here's where they live, here's all the things we're gonna have to shore up, as
Yeah.
opposed to tell us your story. That's one of the antidotes,
Yes.
that's one of the ways to bring the assets to life. Tell
Right.
us about your life, tell us about your culture, tell us about the practices and traditions, and give them voice. So this is crowded. This is exactly what
That's really what
this will
we
set the
did.
stage for what
Yeah.
we're
Super
trying to
excited,
accomplish.
by the way, super excited. It's
Me
just
too.
a different way, to look at it. You know what I mean? And I think, like I said, I use the word jaded because I hear a lot of educators use that. They're like, I feel like I'm a little jaded because I know this type of student. They're like, I'm ready for it. I see them coming. I'm like, oh, this is going to be the one that will give me the most trouble. This one won't do their homework. This one won't. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? They're like, I've been teaching long enough. And I'm like, see, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Been
That's
teaching so
there
long
it is. That's right. It is right there.
they've forgotten also what it's like to be a student and to also still have, I love it because when I look at kids, like we went to a light show this weekend, and when I look at little kids that are looking at lights, you know what I mean? It's just, it's like the most glorious thing they've ever seen. It's like miraculous. Like they're like,
Like
they're
first time
right.
phenomenon, right? That's what we're talking about. Be a beginner.
We need to look at students with fresh eyes.
Yes.
And you know what I mean? And as a beginner and with the same kind of wonderment that we went into teaching for,
Right.
and that's the part that's missing. So
Yeah.
that's why I use the word jaded, not in a negative way, but in a way to say we can't get complacent and think, we've seen it all, know it all, because there's some environmental context, that we have to, they're living in very different times. They're living in very, very different times. And so you really, with our students now that we have, they survived 2 years online.
Right.
During
Right.
COVID. You know what I mean?
Right.
They survived a pandemic. Like, let's give them a little grace, for
Right.
making it through and still being sane and not as anxious, as most adults would have been in this time. So yeah.
So I just put a link to in the chat. If you click on that link and then you scroll to the bottom, it'll say Summer Institute 2023. And anyone who is interested in getting on our mailing list so you can apply when the time comes, we'll probably be sending out applications sometime in March. So please feel free to do that and pass it along to all your colleagues.
The teachers, we need the diverse voices. So yeah, definitely. And I'm so glad we have a little stipend for the teachers as well. I think
Me too. Yeah, we're very happy about that.
huge
So I think we've kind of come to the end. Any closing comments, Joanna, before we?
I am
morning?
honored to serve on the board. I'm honored to really work with you. I'm
Honored to.
really grateful. And this is what I say, this is what co-conspiracy looks like, live and in full effect, right? Because while allyship is good, right? I'm not knocking allyship at all. We need some folks that are going to get off the sidewalk and into the streets and join the fight. So I kudos to you too. I'm grateful for your leadership and keep telling these important stories. So thank you for the time today.
Thank
What a
you.
gift. Thank you. You're so amazing.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. And we'll be posting this sometime today so everyone can hear it. And Joanna, hopefully you'll share it with your students.
Absolutely.
Proud to hear it.
Absolutely. Happy to.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic
Stop
day.
recording.
All right.